Good morning. It's me in Kathmandu. Doing a home presentation. I'm going to talk about conceptual elaboration. It's a beginner's topic, and I'm a beginner and I like talking about beginning things. Conceptual elaboration is a term that comes up often in Buddhist discussions on meditation, particularly in recent works and recent discussions. It wasn't used by D.T. Suzuki and Alex Wayman and some of the other earlier writers on Buddhism, but it's a term since Tibetan Buddhism has become a worldwide phenomena. It's been used a lot. And sometimes it seems a little bit intimidating, conceptual elaboration. It's not really so intimidating. It's just intimidating because we don't think about it. If we were to think about it, even if we're not Buddhists, we would probably be able to figure out what it means. But I'm going to talk about it anyway because although we can probably figure out what it means, we really cannot fully appreciate the reason it's talked about so much, because it's a problem that occurs, an obstacle to meditation itself. And that's why it's discussed quite a bit. When we investigate how to practice meditation, it's right on the forefront. If you cannot eliminate conceptual elaboration, it's going to be impossible to go to any depth in meditation. So let's talk about it a little bit. Conceptual elaboration takes place constantly. And it's a phenomena that, as human beings who use language and words and phrases, may not fully appreciate how much conceptual elaboration dupes us into thinking that we are gaining something through this conceptual elaboration when we're not gaining anything at all. Now, conceptual elaboration, we're painting as kind of the bad guy, but we have to, right from the start here, distinguish two kinds of conceptual elaboration. There's conceptual elaboration as transactional and necessary. And this is the kind of conceptual elaboration that takes us from start to the finish line, as a mathematician might follow an equation in a step-by-step process, a formula to gain a certain result. And this kind of use of the mind is how we do things. It's necessary. We place the mind on any topic, and we go through the various stages of thinking about that topic until we get the desired results, whether it's a resume we're writing, or a shopping list for the grocery store, or a road trip we're planning. So we have the concept of going on a road trip. We can't just leave it at that. We have to think about how we're going to get there to the destination. This kind of placement, conceptual elaboration, is a good thing. It's good, something very necessary. It's transactional. whether transactional within our own thinking processes or transactional for communication with others. But the kind of conceptual elaboration we're talking about here is the kind that's really unnecessary and yet dupes us, seduces us into thinking that we are gaining something. I'll tell a little story that gets right to the point. Richard Feynman, in one of his great books, Richard Feynman was a Nobel Prize winner for his work on light. And this great scientist was walking along a river with his son on their daily walk. And on a particular day, his son, who was only about 7 or 8 at the time, was very glum. And Feynman, noticing it, said to his son, well, what's up? Why are you so silent today? You know, what happened to the chatty guy I know so well? And the son said, well, a boy I was walking with a few days ago, right when we were around this spot, Dad, he called me all sorts of names and said I was really stupid and I didn't know anything. And Feynman said, well, why did he say that? And the son went on to describe what happened. And what happened was the two boys were walking by the stream, and Feynman's son's friend saw a bird. They both saw the bird. And the friend said to the son, well, what kind of bird is that? Do you know? And Feynman's son said, no, I don't know. I don't know what kind of bird that is. And the other boy proudly says, well, it's a so-and-so. And you're really stupid. You don't know the name of that bird. You don't know anything. I mean, that's not that uncommon of a bird. You should know its name. Why don't you know its name? And the boy went on to criticize Feynman's son, saying he just didn't know anything. At which point, Feynman interrupted his son and said, well, listen, son, that bird that was called so-and-so, I don't remember the name. And Feynman said, that bird in Icelandic is called this, and in French it's this, and in Spanish it's this, and in Norwegian it's this, and Russian and Slovakian it's such and such. And Feynman, who obviously is a linguistic, named that bird in about 7 or 8 languages. And he went on to tell his son, he says, although I've just named that bird in 7 or 8 languages, I have told you nothing about the bird whatsoever, because names are adventitious. They're arbitrary. It could be named anything. And if I know that bird's name in English, and then I know that bird's name in Spanish, and I know it in several languages, and I can say that name in several languages, none of those names connect in any way inherently with that bird. It tells you nothing about the bird. None of the names do, not let alone just English. So that friend that criticized you, Feynman went on to say, he's the one who is really stupid, because he thinks that by knowing the name, he is gaining some information about the bird. That's really stupid. That is basic ignorance. So, unfortunately for us human beings, unless we're really bright like Feynman was, which is quite remarkable, because what he said was entirely Buddhist and very, very advanced thinking. But what Feynman said really brings to light just how grand an illusion we're subject to when we are seduced into thinking that knowing the name of something is giving us information about that thing. And this goes on all the time. We could be sitting in a park and a butterfly lands next to us, and it's incredibly beautiful. And we're quite absorbed in looking at that butterfly. And then something kind of like creeps into our mind, nagging at us, almost like a child would nag a parent in a very similar fashion. Like if we had a child with us, that child might say to us, "Hey, what's the name of that butterfly?" But even if we don't have a child with us, our inner mind, our inner child is going to say to us, "Hey, what is that called?" And we're suddenly wondering, well, what's the name of that butterfly? And it's not something that we have control over. We're looking at that butterfly, and it's almost as if we have a child right there with us that, nagging at us, what's its name? And even if there's no child with us, we're going to look at that, what is it called? And, if we were in a class situation and we're discussing butterflies, then yeah, knowing the name is transactional. You're putting together a butterfly collection. They all have to go have nameplates and so forth, identify which ones are which. But we're not in a classroom, and there's no reason to know the names. We're not selling butterflies or anything else. And yet, even though there's no particular reason to know the name, we're thinking, I wonder what it's called. I wonder what that butterfly is called. And let's say, just by some strange coincidence, just as we're having that thought, some friend comes by and sits down next to us, and he says, "Oh, that's a beautiful Kalavinka butterfly, isn't it?" And we say, "Yeah, I was actually just wondering what name it was." And as soon as he says that's a Kalavinka butterfly, we feel at ease. We feel, okay, I satisfied my curiosity, and now I know what it's called. And the real problem here is that we think by knowing its name now, we have gained some information about that butterfly. All of a sudden we're at ease, we feel more comfortable with that butterfly. But the name didn't tell us anything about the butterfly, and the name is completely adventitious. Yes, maybe it is a Kalavinka butterfly, but it could also be called a Ford butterfly, or a blue, purple winged so-and-so butterfly, South African prairie butterfly, a dairygold butterfly, whatever. It doesn't matter what the name is, but what we should be concerned about is that we think it does matter. We think that we are gaining information about that butterfly by knowing its name, and that's really such a mystery how that works and why it works. We may be lying there in the park where we saw the butterfly, and something catches our attention far off in the parking lot, and we're finding ourselves wondering, what is that? Is that a motorcycle or a bicycle? For no reason at all, we're wondering about some form that we're seeing off in the distance. And we notice there's a muffler, that we identify a muffler, and we say to ourselves, oh, it's a motorcycle, of course. Well, do we really need to know? No. No reason. But for some reason, things beg for identification. Our world begs for identification in words and language, phrases. And we somehow feel satisfied when we identify things. And we feel that by identifying things with language and words, we gain some information about those things. And this kind of conceptual elaboration has been identified as a big problem for human beings in our mind, because it takes a lot of energy and robs us at the same time of our experience of our world. And it also sets up a barrier, because while we're busy conceptually elaborating, we cannot inquire, place our mind, because we're distracted by something. So somehow we got to understand this process and see the absurdity of it in order to get to the point where we abandon it. And that's what meditation is all about. It's to help us do that. Let's look into conceptual elaboration a little bit more so we really understand it. Let's say we're at a health bar eating a healthy sandwich. We know it's healthy and good for us, and we're delighting in the whole experience. It tastes great, it's good for us, we're on top of the world. And we're chewing away, in our idle mind that's experiencing all this sandwich and everything starts thinking, I wonder if this sandwich has iron and B vitamins, and how much of all of these things it has, and what kind of protein. Is it an isolate protein or another kind of protein, non-isolate protein? If it's an isolate protein, what is it, 100% isolate or maybe only 50%? So with that in mind, we start thinking, wow, well, maybe I'll look at the label. And then we get distracted. We're going through the menu to see what percentage of this and that, and the ingredients label, to get an idea exactly what's in this sandwich that we're so delighting in. And then we're all absorbed in the label. And, of course, we're not tasting the sandwich anymore. And we're not on top of the world as our appetite is getting satisfied. We're elaborating on this sandwich that we're eating, to the point that we don't even know, we're not even consciously eating our sandwich anymore. So whether we find out it's isolate or not isolate or anything, that's not what we set our mind on when we went to the health food store. We just set our mind on enjoying a sandwich. Suddenly we're not enjoying it anymore. We're inquiring on something else. We're elaborating on that sandwich. Now, we're not placing our mind on those ingredients. There's a big difference. If we were, let's say we were entering the grocery store and we were thinking, I wonder what kind of sandwich I should get. And then we think, well, let me look at the ingredients here and see what kind of sandwiches they offer and which is what I need. And then we go through all the ingredients, and then we think, and we're placing our mind on all of this and examining it with intention. And so with intention, we select a certain sandwich. That's also conceptual elaboration, but it's placement conceptual elaboration. It's the kind of conceptual elaboration that's necessary. But we already selected our sandwich. We're sitting there enjoying it. And all of a sudden our mind gets hijacked and demands to know, what is it? What is it I'm eating? We're not placing our mind, we're being seduced. Our mind is getting hijacked. We're being, led into thinking about all the aspects of that sandwich. It's it's not important at all, not now. It's already in our mouth, it's going down the hatch and we're enjoying it, or we were until we got caught up in this whole idea of knowing more about it. Whether we find out it's good or bad is not really important here. We're already eating it.